when I was younger, I was the kid, I would go into class, and as soon as I get in there and the teacher didn't catch my attention, my forehead would be right on my forearm, and it would be like that for much of the class unless someone was able to capture my attention. I was so disengaged with the stuff that I was being taught that I just didn't know anything else to do besides just look down and wait for that clock to go tick, tick, tick. All right, you're good to go. And so what happened was one day we had a guest speaker come in, and he caught my attention. All of a sudden, my eyes go up, my eyes open up, and I'm interested in what he had to say. He talked about how he wanted to be the best in the world at what he did. So all he did was write down the top 10 people in the world at what he wanted to be the best at. And then he learned, observed, shadowed, studied, and met all 10 of those people. And not only was he successful in his first career, but then he was also successful in management and in real estate. So I was curious. I was like, maybe I can apply this to what I'm interested in. Now, I was interested in golf and fitness. So I wrote down the top 10 people on my list, and then I started to reach out to them. 3 weeks in, I'm on the phone with the number 3 guy on my list. I'm 20 years old at this time. He told me every single thing I needed to do to be successful on that phone call. And all I did was focus on continuing to meet more of the people on my top 10 list and applying what he said. A little over 6 years later, at 26 years old, I get voted as the youngest person on the top 50 golf fitness trainers in America list by Golf Digest. And I'm sharing that with you to say that the only reason that happened at an accelerated rate is because I learned from the greats. So now I was curious. I was like, okay, what else can I apply this to? And I was at this conference with 10,000 people, 2018. This is in Las Vegas. Viva Las Vegas. So I'm there and I am fired up. This guy gets on stage and he starts talking about how he wrote his first book at 25 years old. And 2 years prior to me being 25, I started to write my first book. And I go to my mentor's office and I say, I'm writing my first book. I'm 2 pages in. And she goes, Brandon, why would you write a book right now? Why don't you wait 10 years, get really good at what you do, and then write a book? So what did I do? I listened to my mentor and I stopped writing the book. But then when I saw one of the greats in Las Vegas in front of 10,000 people, he said he wrote his first book at 25. I said, you know what? I believe it's possible again. I believe it's possible again to write that book. And shortly after that speaker, I see another guy come on stage and he says, so many people want the big wins. So many people want the big businesses. So many people want the big results, but they don't focus on the wins that you can get today, tomorrow, the next day. And he said, if you could focus on the small wins, you'll get the big wins. So I said, well, what can I do? I said, you know what? I can work on my book today. And then the next day I said, you know what? I could work on my book today. And then the next day I said, you know what? I could work on my book today. Sometimes it's a sentence. Sometimes it was a paragraph. Sometimes it was a page. Sometimes it was 10 pages. But over time, a year later, that first book came out. 2 years later, that second book came out. 3 years later, that third book came out. 4 years later, that fourth book came out. And now I am excited to announce that I just published my 5th book. Yeah, you can, yeah. So then I start thinking, as the momentum of that first book was coming along, I said, you know what? I don't know if I want to do this golf fitness thing for the rest of my life. So I took some time to think, if I were to climb another mountain, what would that look like? And I'm sitting there at the beach one day and I said, if I climb another mountain, I want to climb it with a massive group of people. I didn't know what the product or service was. I just went back to this philosophy, studying the people who had what I wanted, studying the greats. But instead of studying people, now I started studying the most successful businesses who were impacting the masses. I started studying Amazon, Walmart, Pandora Jewelers, Starbucks. And what did I study? I studied their core values. I said, if I can have the core values similar to the most successful businesses, there's a chance. I don't know if it'll happen, but there is a chance that something special can be created. So I put together the Warm Heart Life core values. It was 1 page of core values, and I would say them almost every day. Into that process, almost a year later, I said, you know what, I'm going to turn this into a book. And the first product for Warm Heart Life was the care principle, which was just based off that 1 page of core values turned into a book. And so after that, I started thinking for quite some time. I started trying different things, and it wasn't until three years later to when the core values were created that the big vision came. And I was in a room with millionaires that day, and I said, you know what? If I'm going to create something big, why not go after it? Why not go after something where there's no limitations, and it would be something I would be so passionate about if I got to this point where this happened? So I said, you know what? I want to focus on creating the most impactful education system in the entire country, where parents would rather send their kids to Warm Heart University than the Harvards, the Yales, the Princetons. And we're going to have 10,000 student universities across 10 of the best cities in the United States. If we can do that, I think I can be excited to do the grit work that it would take to be able to do that. And so when I set that goal out 3 years ago, I had no idea that I would have taught 21 speaker schools in 5 different states and 2 different countries up to this point. I would have had no idea that me and this guy in the back right there, Mr. Carl Michel, would have been able to spend a year in a middle school teaching our future leaders of America as we taught a speaker school in that school. A lot of schools have choruses. I don't know why schools don't have speaker school for people so that they can use their voice to become better leaders. And that was one thing that I never thought would have happened by pursuing this goal that I put out in 2021. I would have never thought that 2 years in a row I would have been able to sell over 230 tickets to the A to B conference, where over 20 different states committed to coming for 2 years in a row. I would have never expected that, but because I studied the greats, all of a sudden the acceleration started to happen. A lot of people talk about how diseases are contagious. I hear it all the time, but the thing that I believe is the most contagious in the world, and I highly, highly recommend you catch some of it, is getting around greatness. Greatness is the most contagious thing in the world in my mind, and if we can get around more of it, we're going to be able to accelerate our path to the top. Thank you so much. My name is Brandon Godoris.